How about now? Can you folks? There we go. Okay. Ooh. And Lloyd, if you're around, hopefully you can hear me as well. All right, we're just going to get started. I am hopeful that I will be able to pull this off better than last time. And I think the only thing I want to make sure I do is set it up so I can actually see you guys' questions, which unfortunately Riverside does not want to make easy for me. So I am going to share my screen, and every once in a while I'll pop into the chat just to see what's going on. So if you see me doing that awkward interaction, it's kind of the only thing I know to do with Riverside to be able to kind of get back to the chat. So it'll show me a little notification up here saying someone's popped a message. I'll click it just to go see what's been asked. Feel free to interrupt me. I think this is the kind of thing that is better explained as you go. And in fact, as I do this, I realize now that there's not a ton of people, and maybe it would just be best if, for whoever's interested, I'll send you a guest link. I'm going to put it in the chat, and I'll wait a couple of minutes before I start. And if you want, you can join this guest link, and this will actually let you speak and come on camera as well. Because there's not a lot of us. There's like 3, 4, 5 of us, I think, in total. And if we want, we can just be on camera and you can interrupt me and ask questions. And that way it's a lot easier for me as I go, as opposed to constantly trying to come back to the chat. But it's up to you if you prefer. Drop your questions in the chat if you can. Join that link and just get on a mic and ask questions as you go. So what I'm going to do on this call, and I just want to clarify, is like I'm going to go over Gadget Framework concepts at a high level. I have about an hour. I can stay a little bit longer. And again, I can do this kind of low fidelity live stream over and over. So it doesn't really matter to me. If you guys have more questions, I can schedule another one later today or tomorrow. What I'm going to cover is important no matter how technical or non-technical you are. Like if you're trying to build something meaningfully complicated in Gadget, learning this framework will really, really help you out, and it's super simple to learn. So if you're a full stack dev, you can learn it. If you're front end dev, junior dev, you can learn it. If you're a citizen dev that's committed, you can learn it. And you should learn it if you want to build anything that's meaningfully complicated. So let's get started. I'm going to teach everything through the lens of a Shopify app just because it can do everything a web app can do, plus it has a few other bells and whistles. And I'm not going to enter anything in this optional field. Sorry, I'm just going to minimize this little window down for myself. And I'm going to do it as a public app. Why not? We'll say some demo app as the name. And we'll just take Remix and TypeScript, the defaults that Gadget gives us. So right away, I get all the infra, the hosting. I'm not going to cover much about that stuff. What I want to cover today is like the coding framework, and it's mostly a back-end framework that Harry and I developed a long time ago. And if you can understand the framework, you can understand where your code's supposed to go. And if you can understand where your code's supposed to go, you will be able to work with the AI 10 times faster and better to make sure it doesn't make mistakes. You'll be able to verify and catch the AI making big, obvious mistakes very easily just by eyeballing it the way I do. And you'll just have a much easier time navigating Gadget. So let's explain the backend framework. I'm going to cover a few topics. I'm just going to open up a doc here. I'm going to blurt out some notes here. These are sometimes going to be incoherent for you folks. They're actually for me. The reason I say that is because I have a hard time teaching or talking about stuff in a teaching manner without writing something down. So this is almost like a little whiteboard for myself to jot notes down as I speak, or else I will lose sight of where I am and where I'm supposed to go next. So what I'm going to try to cover is the backend framework. We're going to cover a few areas. So there's triggers, there's actions, and there's models. And these are kind of core concepts of Gadget's backend that we're going to cover. Within Actions, we're going to cover two different types, the ones that are model scoped and global scoped. And by the way, some of these words might sound terrifying right now. They will all make sense and will seem silly and simple in 20 minutes, I promise, to everyone, regardless of how technical or non-technical you are. Then you have backend routes. We'll talk about those, and all of this produces an API, which we'll talk about, and then finally, we'll get to the front end. And the front end doesn't really have a framework, so I won't call it a front end framework, but we'll talk a little bit about Remix and React Router v7, the two different front end frameworks, actually. Terrifying, I'll call it framework. It's just not our framework. It's a third-party framework. That's why I don't like calling it our framework. We'll talk about the two of them and what the differences are, or lack of differences, and why we chose these two for front-end languages and how they'll help you out. We'll talk about specifically file-based routing, which is what both of these frameworks use to create pages for your front ends. So I'll teach you the relationship between a file and the name of a file and a page in your front end UI. And then finally, we'll talk about auto components and React hooks and using the backend API to build. So I'm going to cover all of this. If I have time, I'll also go into the Shopify connection, but my purpose is mostly to cover the coding framework and take it from there. So let's get started. I am going to just do a quick loop and probably explain things quickly once and then go back through it and explain it properly. So two folders in every app: API, backend, web, front end. I'm going to open up API. Within API, there's actually three concepts: models, actions, and routes. Routes you don't see here by default, but you can always add your own routes folder. Inside the routes folder, you have normal HTTP routes. These are kind of backend routes, or usually the way backend APIs are built from the ground up. You'll create a route, you'll write what that route's supposed to do, what data it's supposed to take in, how it validates it, what it does with it. So for example, you'll say like, oh, I'm going to take in these 3 fields from my front end for a blog post, and then I'm going to validate that they're all legit and not too long. And once I've validated everything, I'm going to shoot it over to the database. Someone's messaging in the chat. Actions have to be created within Gadget. Again. Yeah, you can. If you put the file in the actions folder and you put the right metadata in, it is technically an action. I also think there might be is it docs? Yeah. There might be a GGT command for action creation, either existing or one that we're about to ship. So I don't see it here yet, but I think we're going to give you a terminal command as well that lets you create an action too. But if you put the right metadata in there, technically it's an action. You just need to know what that metadata is, and you can kind of copy paste it from an existing action from a different model. It does need to be nested in the appropriate folder. So actions, if you're curious, if you're going to try to create them, have to either be in the models folder or in the actions folder sitting under API. The difference between actions under a model and actions that sit here is these are the backend API endpoints. We call them actions for reasons that are made up. We added a little bit of functionality to it, and so we decided to give it a name. So these are basically the same as those routes that I was telling you about that are not really that important in Gadget, but you can add them if you need to. The difference is they have a lot of nice features built in, including how they play with the framework. So I'll show you this in action, and then I'll explain it, because I think going in this direction makes a little bit more sense. Let's say I wanted to build the back end of a blog. I need a table to store the data, and I need a way to get that data in that table. The models and the actions will give me the table and the API I need for this example. So I'll create a table, I'll create a model called post. This is where all my blog posts are going to be saved. And in JavaScript, you typically want to do it in singular. You don't want to say posts, and that's just kind of like the convention. Right away, I get a table that has 3 fields, and I can add more fields if I want. So I can add a field called title for the title of the blog post. That's a string. I'll make it required. I'll add a body, string required. Now, what did Gadget do? It instantly created a table and updated it and added these columns. So the fields here are the columns of my table. But on top of that, how am I going to get data into this table without a backend API? I need something for my front end to call securely to then load data into this table. And that's what actions are. And these actions, the ones that are in a folder underneath the folder of the model, are actions that tie to writing data to this table. So these actions are always related to writing data in the post table. We just group them like this because when your app gets big, the way you group logic really matters. You can't find things you're looking for. So we just separate them. And that's the separation I was talking about. When actions are related to writing data to a table, they're under the tables folder. When actions are unrelated to writing data to a table, they're just doing random things like sending an SMS via Twilio or whatnot. You put them under this folder outside of the models. In our docs, we'll call these model scoped actions. These are global scoped actions. And that's because these are scoped to act on a model's record, a record stored in the post table. Model and table I use interchangeably. You should too. Whereas these actions do not write to a table. They might call actions in a model that write to a table, but they themselves don't directly write to a table. They do other things. So when I created the table, just by defining these fields, not only did I get the database table updated, I got the actions API, and you can see automatically without me doing anything, 3 files were added: create, update, and delete. So let's just look at these real quick. And before we look at the code, I'm going to close the assistant. I'm going to do all of this without the assistant, by the way, because I'm trying to teach you the framework and not show you how to use the assistant so you don't have to learn the framework. Actions are 2 parts, largely. 3, actually. I take it back. Actions are 3 parts. A trigger, a code that runs, and permissions, access control. And you should think of this kind of like the 5 W's, except not 5 of them. The trigger is the when. When does my action run? Well, in this case, it runs when the auto-generated, auto-documented backend API that Gadget creates for your actions is called. If you call this API endpoint that Gadget automatically generated for this table, and you send in the title and the body, this file will run. And the other condition that needs to be met is not just the when, but the who. Who is allowed to call this action? And so in my case right now, I only have one user role in my application called the unauthenticated user. If you go to access control down here and permissions, you'll actually see there's columns for roles. I'm going to move this. You can add more roles. So I'm going to add another role and say like logged in, or here, logged in user. Now I have 2 roles to choose from, and when I go look at my actions, I can decide who's allowed to run this, the logged in user or unauthenticated. Normally in a web app, the logged in user is already represented, and I kind of regret having done this with a Shopify app now, so I'm going to change my mind and quickly go and do exactly what I did with a web app, because I think we'll get a much richer understanding of the framework this way instead of doing it with a Shopify app. Sorry about that. I know I'm taking you guys for a ride. Let me quickly catch up. So we're going to say there's a title and there's a body. And both were required, I think is where we left it off. So I'm pretty much caught up with where we were. Created the blog table. the actions are here, the routes table is here. By the way, if you notice some differences between our templates, it's because in the web app template, we always show you the routes folder by default. You'll often need it, whereas in a Shopify app template, sometimes you don't, and new users get distracted by it. And so in the web app template, it's here. In the Shopify template, you have to add it yourself. But if you add it, it'll behave exactly the same as it does in the web app template. That's models, and I was talking about actions, and yeah, I was just saying, like, in this template for web apps, there is already 2 users, one signed in, one unauthenticated, and so when actions are created, by default in this template, Gadget assumes the signed in user has access to every action. You can turn it off, and Gadget assumes the unauthenticated user, the one that's not logged into your app, does not have access to any actions, but you can turn some on because sometimes you want to expose data to a non-logged in user as well. An example would be in Shopify itself, for example, reading products is accessible to everyone in the world. Anyone can go visit a store and see the products. Unauthenticated users are able to read products, but they can't write them. They can't create new products. The store owner signs in and creates the product. So that's kind of a bit of an analogy of like how you want to think about permissioning. So think of the action framework in who, which is the role, which kind of comes from the roles and permissions page, when, which is the triggers, and what, which is the code itself. So if a signed in user makes this API call from a front end correctly, and usually when I say makes this API call from a front end, I mean they click a button and the developer who wrote the code wrote it so that clicking the button runs this this API call, then this file will run. Because all Gadget will do will check, hey, is the right person calling it the right way? If so, let's run it. Now, what happens when Gadget's running your file? So a few things. First thing we do is we go and check all your validations. So anything you add as validations, we will make sure they're valid. And we don't even bother running your action if it is invalid. So if, for example, if I add something that was required and the API call didn't include it, the API would automatically return an error message saying, sorry, you're missing required fields. And so that's the first thing that gets checked. And then once we've decided all data is valid, by default, we have an action here called run. And what it will do is in line 5, it'll take the parameters, which is basically body and title. These are the parameters that are coming in from your API call. And line 6, it'll make sure that the data is being written to the right user's account. This line, you will only find it in the app templates in Gadget where, here, I'll open another screen and show it to you guys, where you pick multi-party auth. If you pick single party auth, that line won't be there. This line won't be there. The reason is multi-party auth means each user can only access their own data, meaning I can't write to some random other person's table because we're 2 separate customers. We don't trust each other. We don't know each other. I'm company A, they're company B. We should not be able to write to each other's tables. But in this world, it's a tool for me and my colleagues. It's an internal tool. We all trust each other. And so all the data we write is actually written to the same table because we all want to see each other's data because we're colleagues. So I picked multi-party auth when I created this app, and that's why line 6 is here. And line 6 just makes sure by default that you're not allowed to write to someone else's table. And then line 7, we save the data to the table. So we take the incoming data from the API, we make sure we're not about to save it to anyone else's table, we save it to your table. And by your, I mean the user that is making the call is clicking the button, because there's always a user table, and I'll get to that in a second. So this is run. Now what you can do with this is kind of neat. Line right here before save, you can run logic to augment or enrich any incoming data. This is typically where you want to do this. So for example, let's say you got the blog title and body, and you want to have some sort of like AI generated tag list. So let's say there was a third field in our table called tags, and this was some sort of enum, which is a multi-option. We'll say, yes, it's an enum where multiple options can actually be selected. And I don't know, we'll say there's like 3 categories. There's like product announcement, there's, I don't know, marketing, live stream, and webinar. And every time we write a post, we want, for whatever reason, the AI and not a human being to decide one of these 4 categories. What we would do is we would maybe leave it as optional in our table, because we're not going to have it right away when we create a new blog post, right? Like when we create the blog post, we're just going to send in the title and the body. We want the tags over here to actually be populated by the AI. So I'm going to leave this as optional. I'm not going to make this required, because if I make it required, my API call will fail. I will not be able to create a blog post. And instead, what I would do, and I'm not going to do this right now, I'm just kind of trying to teach you guys the concepts and the framework, is I would write some code here that says, you know, make an API call to OpenAI to select the right tag from the 4 options based on the title and the body. So I would send the title and body to OpenAI along with some prompt and say, hey, pick between one of these 4 tags. OpenAI would return the result. So OpenAI would respond with the result. I would take the response and put it in the tags field, and then I would save the record. And so this is kind of what I mean. Like I got 2 fields of data, title and body, from the user in the front end. There's going to be a form where they can create a blog post, and they're just going to give me title and body. And then I'm going to take title and body and I'm going to figure out tags, and then I'm going to save it all to a database table. This is called before save in a lot of frameworks, like in Ruby on Rails and whatnot. It's the place you put code that is tied to data work that typically should happen before you save. And that's 99% of data work, because you don't want to save twice. You don't want to like save it, then go do a bunch of stuff with OpenAI and then save just that one field again. The reason you don't want to do that is because that's incredibly inefficient. You've just doubled your time spent instead of cutting it in half. So ideally you want to manipulate data before saving it. After save is also a thing, line 12, like the line that comes right after await save record. This is very rarely used. It's things you want to do still tied to the run transaction, which I'll get to what that actually means in a second. I realized I didn't really explain that well. But you have to do them after save. And really the only example I can think of off the top of my head is the database always gives you the ID. So when we create a record, Postgres will return an ID. And usually that's incremental. So it'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But we don't decide the ID. Postgres returns it to us. And sometimes people don't like that ID. They don't want their table to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they want like another UUID, like a user-facing user ID. And this one, they'll have to create themselves. And sometimes, often, a way to create it is after save, take the Postgres ID and append some alphanumeric string to it and create a new ID. You know, so Shopify actually does this. So inside Shopify, there's 2 order IDs. You'll see a long number, but then when the user gets an email, it's not a long number. It's ORDR1345 or something kind of neat and nice looking like that. So you can kind of take the ID and do something like this, where it's like, yeah, ORDR1, you know, and then you probably need to save again if that's what you're doing. So this is after save, very rare. I can't really think of too many good examples. Usually only things that require you to save something first. So only things that the database is going to fill in. And the only one I can think of is ID and timestamps. By the way, that's why these have gadget logos. It's like, you don't tell us these, we tell you what these are, and we get these from the database. When you save data, the database will tell us exactly the time that it was saved and the ID, and so you get that back from us. So the only examples of what I can think of that you would do after save are manipulate those three fields and generate new data from them. And the only example that seems legit to me is this one. So that's before save and that's after save. And this is the run function. The first function that always runs whenever an action is called correctly by the right person in the right way is the run function. The run function is a database transaction. So what is a database transaction? How do I explain this best? Think of a database transaction as a group of data work that you want to happen at the same time or not happen at all. So we're dealing with computers, and when you're dealing with computers, anything can fail. So if I'm trying to save a blog post, here, let me make my data model a bit more real. This would not be my data model. If I had a simple blog, I would actually have two tables. I would have a blog table, and I would have a separate table called blog images or comments. Let's do comments. And comments are going to be the comments people can leave on any blog post. There's going to be a relationship between comments and blog, and the relationship is going to be described using Gadget's kind of relationship builder. We use Ruby on Rails language. It's super easy once you know it. Just think of it in English. Does a comment belong to a blog post? Does a comment have many blog posts? Does a comment have one blog post? And then this one's a little bit trickier. I'll explain this some other time. But this is a many-to-many relationship. In our case, comments always belong to a single blog post. You can't have the same comment on 10 blog posts. That would be weird. So I'm going to say comment belongs to parent. Gadget's asking me to pick the parent model, which is going to be blog. So I'm just going to go pick blog from the list. Gadget's going to ask me for the inverse of the relationship. So a blog has one comment. No, that's weird. A blog has many comments. Yeah, that's right. I'll pick that. And Gadget will set up the relationship between these two tables. If you're a developer listening, all the foreign keys, all the ID fields are actually stored inside of these fields. So we just set up the foreign keys for you, and then whenever you're doing joins, you kind of jump through these foreign key relationships like you normally would. So sorry, that was a little tangent. I just wanted to give you guys a slightly more rich data model. I want to go back and explain database transactionality. So when I create a blog post, I probably want to, actually I wouldn't want to create the blog comments at the same time. Let me do another table, we'll say blog images. Same thing, we'll say every blog has many images. So blog image belongs to blog, blog has many blog images. Now, whenever I create a blog post, I want to create the blog images at the same time too. Like I'm gonna, even though it's two database tables, I'm gonna have one form in the front end. You know what I mean? So like the user is gonna give me a title, a body, and an image. I'm gonna take the title and body and put it in this table, and I'm gonna put the image in this table. And the reason I do it this way is because there's a relationship between them where one blog post can have many images. So to support that, there's two ways to do it. Either I can do it the really silly way and add many fields, like 50 fields called blog image 1, blog image 2, blog image 3. But even that, first of all, is a really messy table. Still has a cap. I can only add so many columns. But when I do it this way, when I give it a separate table and I create a relationship where I can say a blog post can have many blog images, I can just start storing as many as I like in this table, and that number can be infinite. So it's just a better data model, is what I would say. Now, when I create a blog post, I want the blog images created as well. What if something fails along the way? What if the blog post fails to save? Because again, computers, I can't really guarantee anything. Google goes down. Google goes down middle of your API call. Half of it works, half of it doesn't work. These are all very real scenarios. I'm not making this up. This is happening all the time in microseconds and milliseconds with computers where things kind of disconnect and reconnect. And by default, your code has to handle it. And so the way that specific case, which is incredibly common, is handled is called database transactionality. And by default, Gadget's run function is a database transaction, which means everything you put here will either work, or if anything doesn't work, the whole thing will be reverted. And that's what you want. Like if the blog post doesn't save, you don't want blog images to randomly save, because you start getting weird corrupted data where you'll have rows in a table over here, but the blog field, which would normally give you the ID of the blog post the images belong to, would be empty. And so you'd have all these like weird corrupt data states that are gonna make it really hard to build your app or even understand why things are broken. And so you never want that situation. And usually you want database transactionality on so that the whole thing either works or doesn't. Now, you can turn it off as well. I won't go through how to turn it off. It's in our docs. But if for whatever reason you have a use case where if part A fails, I don't want to abandon part B, I want to keep doing part B, there's some legit advanced use cases for that. You can turn off the transactionality in your run function for any action by adding a line down here. I'm not going to go through it. By the way, the AI should know how to do all of this. I'm just teaching this all to you because it makes mistakes, and just learning Gadget the right way will get you really, really far. So the run function is data work. The line right before await save is the data work you want to do before saving the data, usually enriching it. And the line right after is the data work you want to do after. Usually if any of this fails, all of it gets reverted, which is kind of what you want. And then separately, if you ask the assistant or you decide yourself to run some code that runs business logic, there's a second action here called on success. I want to show it to you guys. I'm going to go to another file. I'm going to go to our user table here. And yeah, let me just like get the actual snippet itself, bring it back with me. Okay. So we don't show it by default, but you can add it. This is what it looks like. It's called on success, and your logic goes wherever you like. And this function will run when the run function has finished successfully. So if the blog post and the blog images are all saved to my database correctly, I'll start running whatever logic is put in here. And this is where you want to put business logic. You don't want to put business logic up here. This is just data work usually. So if you want to like send an email to all blog subscribers, letting them know to read your latest post, you put it here. And the reason you put it here and not up here is performance and scalability. Your database needs to be kept incredibly performant. And the best way to keep databases performant is to only do data work when you're talking to them. So we actually run your run function and your on success function in two very different places. You don't see it, but we actually have different infrastructure running these two functions in different places. That's one of the beauties of Gadget, is like, you don't need to know what the right infrastructure for your code is. It's running on different infrastructure depending on where you put it. So the run function is supposed to be really, really fast database work. And then everything else is running in your back end. And that's because the database, you want to like 100 milliseconds max, figure everything out, save it, get out of there. Usually even less, like 10 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds. 100 milliseconds is like your worst case scenario. Whereas like sending an email via Stripe, sending an SMS, sending that 10,000 emails, that can take time. You do not want to lock your database for hundreds of milliseconds or seconds. And so you want to separate this work. The other thing is you don't want to run this work until the data work is successful. You don't want to send people emails saying, hey, everyone, go check out my blog post when the blog post failed to save to the database. So this framework not only gives you a logical way of thinking about how to break down your backend code, but also like a way to know where to find it. When I'm looking at somebody else's app and I've never even built it myself, one of the nice things about Gadget is just looking at the nav, I can tell so much about an application. Like I just kind of want to get you guys through this exercise. Like just looking at this, I know there's a backend database for a blog with blog table, image table, and comment table. I know that people can create, update, and delete these records in all of these tables. If I click on any of them, I know who can create them, who can delete them, who can update them, and I know how, like what they have to do, either click a button to make this API call, or maybe they're developers and they can write code and make the API call, but somebody's got to make this API call. And I know what happens when it runs. I can kind of look at the code at a glance and be like, okay, there's some data work. If this was actually code, I'd immediately spot it. I'd look for this line. I'd be like, okay, there's some work being done before it's saved, some work being done after it's saved. And then, oh, okay, there's some business logic being run after all the data work is successful. And this, just knowing this makes it so easy to interact with the AI. Like when I'm getting code back from it, I just skim, looking at the names of the files, looking at where they are, because if it's a file under action, under model, it's an action on a record. And usually these are going to be create, update, delete, or other verbs like publish, unpublish. So I can add an action called publish, and then write some code for what does this publish action do, and now I can put a nice publish button in my UI, or I can add another action called unpublish. Oops, that should have been .ts. And then write the code here, and this will be the publish action. And so just by the names and where they are, I kind of know what the actions are and who can take them and when. And that makes it really easy to kind of navigate Gadget apps and know if the AI is doing anything right or wrong. So if I ask the AI for like an API endpoint that saves a blog post, enriches it, and then sends an email to my customers, I would expect to get back a action under the blog model with a bunch of code before save, no code after save, and some code in and on success. And if I don't see that visually when I'm working with the AI, I pause and I look at it a little bit deeper. But I won't lie, like I'm at a point where when I'm using the assistant, I don't read the code 90% of the time. At best, I kind of skim it. I apply it, I see if it works, and if it didn't work, I just roll it back really quickly and start over again. So, action framework, round one. We're going to do another loop over it just to kind of explain it. The who is the permissions, the roles. The roles come from the permissioning system. The when are the triggers. The what is the action itself. I want to talk about triggers a little bit more because the only trigger you've seen so far is someone calling the API. This is because this is one of the most popular triggers. I'm just going to close this folder so you can see my nav a little bit better. As you create models and actions, if you click on docs, you'll notice Gadget is automatically creating a backend API and documenting it for you. So I didn't do anything, but instantly Gadget created and documented the entire backend API for the blog table, blog image, and comment. And in this API, you can find how to do, I'm going to open it in a full screen just because it's bigger. You can find how to do anything with relation to these tables. So how do I find one blog record? How do I find the first of many? How do I find many? How do I sort, search, filter, paginate, create, update, delete, publish, unpublish? All of the bulk actions, if you want to do bulk create, bulk update, all of the code and documentation is automatically generated And all of this documentation is then fed back to the assistant. So the assistant in Gadget has instant real-time access to these docs that are being generated based on the backend framework. So as soon as you start adding backend actions, these get written. If I go add another table just for fun, let's say some table, you can see the table gets generated and the actions get generated. And if I go back to my docs and I hit, oops, I'm in the wrong docs here, and I hit refresh, you'll see some table. And now, how do I search, filter, create, update, delete records in some table? Instantly documented, and the documentation instantly fed to the AI. So now the AI is ready to go build front ends with these APIs. And by the way, this is why, unlike every other coding tool, vibe coding tool, low code tool, we always go back end to front end in Gadget because one, back ends are hard, front ends are not. Front ends take a lot of time, but back ends have a lot to do with like scalability and performance. And so getting the back end right, getting your API and then getting the API and using it to build a front end is a much better way to build kind of like good back ends. And so we recommend it, and our product is always better if you do it that way because you get a lot of cool free stuff like an instantly auto-generated API. So always just try to think about your tables first, get them in place, get your actions, think about what your actions should be doing and who is doing them, and then move on to building your front end once the API is ready and you're happy with it. That would be my recommendation. Not a lot of people do it because people are very visual. They like to see the thing in front of their eyes. I have an easy time visualizing code in my head, so I can draw the picture of what I'm talking about in my own head. Sorry, I'm just trying to plug my laptop back in. The picture of what I'm trying to draw in my own head at any given point in time. And so I love starting with the back end, get my API, then go worry about what my front end's looking like. Okay, so database transactionality we covered. And then the on success is the non-database work that you want to happen after. These are all model actions. So they were actions related to writing data to a model. Now, if you're curious about reading data from a model, we don't put them in the actions folder, but we automatically document them in your API. So yes, of course, you can read from your blog table. It would be weird if you couldn't. And that's where, get the records, get all records, get one record, all of these API endpoints, search, filter, these are all kind of read API endpoints. You don't need the code because you're rarely ever going to change the code. So you just run the API call whenever you like, and we will do the thing that you're asking us to do. One of the really, really nice things is everything in this API is powered by the right infrastructure. So search is already set up on Elasticsearch. Any other tool in the world you use, you're going to spend 3 weeks of your life figuring out how to set up search functionality using Elasticsearch. Not with Gadget. The search API is always powered by Elasticsearch. And so if you put a search in your front end, or if you use the search API even without a UI, it will work, it'll be performant, and it'll be great. The database run function is run in a database. The on success is run in a separate environment. So all of these decisions around where and what infrastructure should the code be running, we've made under the scenes, and that's kind of why we can scale your app. Otherwise, we would not be comfortable scaling your app because we don't know what decisions you would be making and if we agree with those decisions or not. We know we can scale these decisions, and so if anyone's willing to buy into them, we're happy to keep running your app and growing it till the end of time. So the Gadget framework, that was super high level. I want to go back to triggers. I only talked about the API endpoints because that was the one we've seen so far in this example, but there are other ones too. Specifically, let's close the models folder and go to this actions folder and create a new global action. So we'll say like send weekly email.js. What if I didn't want to send an email every single time I create a blog post, right? That's what this line is suggesting, that if I put code here, every time I create a blog post, I will also send an email. Let's say I don't want to do that. Instead, I want to send an email once a week, like a summary of what's going on with my blog. Because that email sending is not writing data to a database table, I don't care to save when did I send people emails. It's not information I need to save. It'll cost me a lot of money. I just want to send the email and that's it. We would put the action in this actions folder and not under a model because we're not writing to any database tables. We might be reading from them. In fact, we are going to read from a bunch of them, but we're not writing to any. So this is a global action, not a model action. I created it under the actions folder, and unfortunately, Gadget doesn't give you the boilerplate here, which is really a shame. I think that's actually a bug. Let me just test that out one more time. Oh, I think I know what I did. It's because I didn't type the name correctly the first time. Yeah, and when you type the name correctly, you kind of get the Gadget boilerplate, and this is kind of important. You need this line in your file for the file to behave the way I'm explaining it as part of our framework. So in the global action, you have a run function, and very different from the model actions. The run function here is not for data work. It's for anything you want to do. There's also an on success, but because the run and the on success are both for business logic, it's rare that you would separate your code between the two. You can just put everything in run, and that's usually what I do. And what's neat about global actions is they have different API triggers. So yes, they automatically get an API endpoint that is automatically documented. So as soon as I created that action, if you go to global actions, you'll see send weekly email. There's the API call for it. If I call this, this file will run. Same framework. The right person needs to call it. They need to call it the right way. The file will run. And now what I would do here is I would say like, go through every blog post in my blog table and see when it was published. And if it was recently published, include it in my weekly summary and send to all subscribers in the user table. I'm assuming my subscribers are all going to go in my user table, which was part of the app at the beginning. The user table, by the way, is just given to you because I picked the fact that there is going to be a login system when I created the app. And if there's a login system, there has to be a user table. So that's where this code would go. But I would not want to be calling my API once a week. That would be annoying. Like, this is not a button, right? This is an automated schedule that should be firing this email once a week. So I can delete the API trigger and say, no, I'm not going to call the API to run this. Instead, I want a scheduler. And we have a no-code scheduler, so you can pick when the code should run. So I can say every week or every month, day 1, midnight, run this code. And you can see, by the way, as I filled this in the UI, it showed up in my file as well. So we show you the same UI input in code as well. And the reason we do this is because if you're not using Gadget's editor, if you're using your own editor, which you can do, it would be really annoying not to see all of your changes in code. So you can see it both in the UI and in the code. And now, every time on the 1st of the month at midnight UTC, this code will run. The next run is July 1st. So that's the nice thing about global scoped actions is one, they have more triggers available to them than just the API endpoint, namely schedulers. And 2, they're intended for backend actions that don't write data to a database table. I'm going to pause for a second because someone's asking a question. Actions have to be, will this entire stream be uploaded? Yes, the entire stream, I believe, is saved to our YouTube automatically. So if you go to Gadget's YouTube, if you're subscribed to the YouTube, it will be there. Once the scheduler is set, this will run no matter what and for all Shopify sites and websites. Yes, once the scheduler is set, it will run on that schedule no matter what, and it will do whatever you put in the code. And the reason I say it this way is because you asked uh, two questions. Sorry, let me go back to. You asked two questions. Will it run no matter what? Yes. That's always yes. It will run no matter what. Will it run for all Shopify sites and websites? That depends on your code. Like if you decide no, if you decide that the code says only for this one shop ID, because you can do that. It's like you can start your code by saying like, for this one shop ID I care about, do XYZ, you know? So that part's up to you. The how many shops does it impact? What does it do? That's inside your code. It has the ability to do it for all shops. You decide what it does. You decide when it does it. And that's kind of like the just a mental model of Gadget is we don't tell you how your app should work. We just set up the obvious basics that everyone needs. You pencil in the important decisions that make your app unique. And the important decisions are the 5 whys, the W's. Who, when, what, where, why, how. Those are kind of the things you will always answer in code or by picking things in our UI. We can't answer those things. Those are business logic. That's what makes your app different from every other app in the world. The 70% of the nonsense code, the infrastructure, we provide all of that as boilerplate because it is truly the same every single application in the world, and it makes no sense that we all rewrite it over and over. What happens if the scheduler fails? Great question. What happens is whatever you decide happens in your code. So you write the code, and if you decide that, for example, it's going to try to send an email, and if the email sending fails, it should do XYZ, which might be like alert you, the developer, to investigate why it failed and do something about it. It might be try it again. That's actually very common. So if I were actually doing this, this is a great lead into a way more advanced concept of Gadget called background jobs. But if I had 90,000 blog subscribers in my user table, this action would time out because by default, Gadget gives you, I think, like 15 minutes max or 3 minutes max to run your code, which is an ungodly amount of time. Usually an API call is 100 milliseconds. But 3 minutes is not enough time to send 90,000 100 millisecond API calls. And so if I wanted to actually on a schedule email 90,000 people, it's going to fail left and right. It would be junk. It would be really confusing. What I would actually do is I would use a background job. And I would enqueue the work to email every single subscriber. Actually, you know what? Let's just see what the AI does here because I'm too lazy to write code right now. But if we could look at code while I talk about this, that'd be great. Can you give me a global action that looks through my blog table for posts that are less than a week old and emails them to all of my users? I want to send this once a month. I expect hundreds of thousands of users that will need to get this email. I'm curious. I'm just telling it that in hopes that it realizes I'm going to be doing this for a lot of people. It should use a background job. Because if I were doing this for like 3 people, doesn't matter. I would just write it right here and say, yeah, fire the 3 emails at the same time. It won't take 3 minutes to fire 3 emails. But 100,000 people will take way more than 3 minutes, so I don't want it to make a mistake and just dump all the code in one file. I want it to break it into a background job. And by the way, this all probably feels super intimidating to a newbie, but I guarantee you hear this a second or third time, it'll just start making sense. It's like every Gadget concept maps to one of the 5 W's. And once you know which one, you just start thinking in like who, where, when, what, why. I hate this bug. This thing, when it's spinning, is supposed to show me streaming code. I'm not supposed to be staring at nothing. This is supposed to happen. There we go. By the way, I'll show you guys what I mean by I can scan files really quickly without really reading them. So like right away, as it's doing this, what am I looking at? First thing I'm looking at is the file path. I see API/actions, so I know API/actions, meaning it didn't put it in a model folder. Otherwise, it would be API model actions. And that makes sense to me because I'm not writing data to any table. So it did the right thing so far. And then I'll go and open the full screen up just to kind of scan it. Has a lot of log statements I found. It goes and filters my blog posts and goes through users. Okay, and then this line 76. Yeah, perfect. So I'm going to accept this. Line 76 is what I want to show you. It did something smart, which is instead of sending the emails the normal way, using Gadget's email sending system, which we have built in, which you don't have to use. It's super rudimentary. It's meant to be ugly. It's meant to be for development, not production. But it's using that by default right now, except it's API.enqueue. Instead of making the API call the normal way, it added this .enqueue, and that's what creates what's called a background job. And a background job is something that you need to run reliably in the background, but you're actually not that fussed about when it is done. Meaning you don't have a user waiting for it to finish usually. So they click a button maybe, or something happens, but the outcome they're not waiting for right there. Like a good example is when you do a giant export of a table, often most softwares won't give you the export right away. They'll show you a message that's like, hey, we're going to email you when this is ready. And the reason they do that is getting that data ready can take time. Getting that data ready is error prone. And you don't really need it right then and there. Like getting it within a minute or two is very acceptable. So typically, instead of trying to do it right then and there and then failing and showing you error messages and asking you to retry, usually this is the kind of work that people are like, I don't care if you get that email at 1 p.m. versus 1:05 p.m. I just care that you get it. And I want you to get it for sure. So I'll put it in a background job. And just by putting it in a background job, I can do certain things like decide how many times to retry it or set concurrency on it. In this case, Gadget didn't do that. It didn't ask to retry, which I think is a bit of a shame. Or did it? No, it didn't. I just want to make sure. Yeah, this is just the email content. So it didn't set it to retry, but you could. You could basically say like, do this and retry up to 10 times. And what that would mean is like, send the email to each user up to 10 times until it succeeds. So if I send it once to John and it fails, I'll try again, I'll try again, I'll try again, I'll try again. Usually by the 10th time, it's already succeeded, but on 10, that would be considered a final failure. And I'd probably have some other process for those where like, I'd notify myself periodically of how many have reached the final failure point and consider changing my logic because clearly something's going wrong if I can't send the email after trying 10 times. So that's another one of the advantages of global actions is they can run things as a background job and then retry many, many times. And if you run it as a background job, once this is actually running, you'll see it in this nice UI. You'll see like a row show up for each job. So in this case, it would be like each queue of emails I create. And you can actually observe which ones are working, which ones are failing, how many failures you've had, and so on. So you got a nice dashboard for managing. Really advanced concept, which it shouldn't be, but unfortunately is. The AI should usually do a good job of using background jobs, especially if you tell it or it knows that it's going to do something for a lot of users and that it's something that the user isn't waiting for in the UI and it's kind of happening in the background. By the way, if you're curious, other examples of background jobs are like lots of back-end work typically happens in a background job. Gadget's entire integration of Shopify's webhook system is under the hood built on background jobs. We don't show this to you, but we have a background job system ourselves. We use background jobs to process webhooks, and the reason is we just want them to work, and we don't care exactly when they run. Like, we obviously want to get it right the first time, but if it doesn't work, we want to retry. We don't want to say, oh, okay, the webhook didn't arrive or we failed to run it, so let's stop trying. We retry up to 11 times, I believe, for every single one of the webhooks that comes from Shopify or other platforms. So this is kind of the core of your backend framework. Who is permissions down here under access control. When is triggers. That's the trigger card. What is the action itself? And there's two types. There's model actions, which are actions that write data to table records. They have data function called run and an onSuccess function that's for business logic. And then there's global actions that are for doing other things that have nothing to do with writing data to a table. The third concept in the backend framework, the last concept of the backend framework, is routes. This is traditionally how backends are built. This is like what you would find in every normal programming language on the internet that is not trying to help you save time. You would just find a routes folder, and your job would be to write all of the code, including the code Gadget magically makes disappear. So what you see here, this is code. We've just hidden it from you. There's lots of code was taken to generate this API endpoint. We don't ask you to write it. We write it for you and we hide it from you. We also write all of the code that manages your permissioning system, and we hide that from you too. If you were to build an API yourself from the ground up, you would write numerous files in your routes folder yourself. But because of our actions concept, often you can just use our actions and save a ton of time. Now, the reason we give you this routes folder is not everything you're going to do is going to fit into this nice framework. Some things won't work in actions, at least today, until we add more functionality. Examples are the file of code needed to receive a webhook from a API that is not integrated into Gadget. So right now Shopify is integrated into Gadget, and if you add a Shopify connection, the webhooks will act as triggers for your actions. But if you go integrate Stripe yourself, we don't have a Stripe integration, you're going to have to write the entire integration in routes, and it's going to be many, many, many files of routes for that integration. So one to say, hey, I'm the right person getting the right data. Another one saying, hey, this is the way I expect data. Another one saying, hey, when I get the data, these are the things I should check. Another one saying, hey, after checking all the things, I should go run the code. So literally replacing all of the bits of Gadget with files and files of code. So you can still do it yourself. We always give you access, and the reason is we don't want to be considered a low-code or no-code platform. We think they carry a negative connotation where developers can get 98% of their project done, and then the last 2% they get stuck because they have some unique requirement that the framework unfortunately can't support, and then they churn. We don't want that, and so what we tell everyone is you should be able to do 95, 98% of your project up here, and then for the 5% where we don't have what you need, go write the code down here, but it's still 95% faster than doing it elsewhere. So that's the only reason routes exist. I won't go through them much other than they are there for the exceptional cases where models and actions are insufficient, like listening to third-party APIs that are not integrated or doing things that just can't be handled by a GraphQL API, which is the API we generate for you. This is all GraphQL is what it's called. So it has certain limitations, and if you hit those limitations, you can't use our actions framework. You have to go and write your own routes. Now, all of these models and actions produce my API. I would be ready to go build a front end in my web folder. So I could close my API folder, look at the front end here, and just at a high level, there's a components folder. By default, because I picked the web app template, ShodCN is installed, and there's a bunch of the components that are already placed inside here. Not all of the ShodCN components are here. We just put the main ones. If you need other ones, both you or the AI will have to actually put them in your UI folder. So the ShotCN components are already installed. And then routes, because again, at the beginning of the project, I said I was going to build a SaaS with many different users that don't trust each other in a user table. Where's my user table? User table here. Gadget automatically created a login system. So I got the user table, and the user table automatically by default has email, password, and Google SSO. That's why you have all these weird columns, these weird fields. It's because some of these are needed to store the authentication data from Google and or even just like the user's email password stuff very securely. And so there's a lot of fields on this table, and then some of them you'll recognize, like, well, when did they last sign in? What's their email? What's their first name, last name? You can change a bunch of these. You can delete them. You can add new ones. If you delete the wrong things, you will break your app. So don't delete the wrong things. But you can add new ones if you need to as well. So you can reshape this table. One thing to note, and this is really important, but first let me go back. Fix the mic, please. What is wrong with the mic? Can a few people chime in and give me a sense of what could be going wrong here? Otherwise, I'm not sure what to fix. Anyone else or RelyKit? Do you have more feedback? I'm going to keep going, but if you can tell me exactly what's wrong, I'll do my best to fix it. I'm not sure what I would have done to have caused the issue. Shunt, I missed your question earlier. There is currently no dynamic way to schedule API calls using the scheduler. It's a missing feature I keep forgetting to add to our roadmap. Thank you for reminding me. I will get it added to our roadmap. Right now, no, the scheduler has to be set by the developer. It's a limitation. Okay, carrying on. Oh, wait, there's a fix mic, please. It's not that. Sometimes it's broken, cracking the whole time, but not terrible. Cracking. Okay. It is worse on YouTube, apparently, if that helps. So I will share the live stream link for Riverside directly, because I think that might be better. And if that link is not better, what I'll do is I'll just disconnect my AirPods real quick and reconnect them and see if that helps. Is there? Can you folks hear me now? Way better. Okay, great. I also realized I didn't have voice isolation on, so I just turned on voice isolation on my AirPods. Okay, the lag is probably just Riverside, unfortunately, so hopefully that gets better over time. And Riverside is so bad, it's unbelievable. It's like you guys are talking to me in the chat, but it doesn't scroll. So I gotta remember to keep scrolling to see what everyone's saying, or else I have no clue what's going on. All right, let me share my screen again and let us continue. Thank you, Remy. Okay, so what was I trying to explain? I was trying to explain the user login system. So there's a user table. The users that sign up to your app are going to go in here. Every user has a role. By default, the role is unauthenticated when a user is created. But automatically, when they log in, we switch their role from unauthenticated to signed in. And so that's what this is all about. chat. Do I think I missed something? Okay. Signed in, unauthenticated. So as soon as a user is added to my app, Gadget will make them unauthenticated. But as soon as they sign in using the sign in action, they will go from unauthenticated to logged in. So if they're logged out, they'll be able to do whatever the logged out user is able to do, which is currently very little. And if they're logged in, they can do what the logged in user can do. And by the way, you'll see some of the actions that we automatically give you on the user table. So create, update, delete, sign in, sign up, sign out, send verify email, send reset password. These are just to power login system. If someone forgets an email, they need to send a reset password. They need to reset the password. They need to verify their email if they're doing email password sign up. So these are all the API endpoints that would power the different buttons that you see in a login system. And because some of them need to be available to people who have forgotten their passwords, you see some of them are actually turned on logged out. Because like that's the person who needs to reset the password hasn't logged in yet. They don't remember their password. If you turn this off, no one will ever be able to reset a password again because they won't be able to log in and they won't be able to access it logged out. So that's kind of why these defaults are there. We create these automatically for email, password, and Google sign in, and we turn on all the right permissions for you. And if you go to your front end, before you build any front ends, you'll see there's a default front end there automatically for every single app. Sorry, this is really slow. The default front end is just a website, a login page. Oh, that's really weird. Oh, it was just a slow load. My bad. A login page with Google, email, password, and all these buttons. So I can go log in, sign up, sign in. This is sign up. This is reset password. These are all running the different actions I was showing you in the back end. These will run when these buttons are clicked. So that's kind of what I mean, right? Like if you go look at send, let's go back to the front end. Let's look at this one, reset password. This action is triggered by an API call, but we went ahead and created a front end file where, and I'll show you the file, where clicking this will make that API call. So where is this file? If you go look at /sign-in, and by the way, if you're looking at the front end, you'll see that the file names actually tell you what you're looking at. So _app is for the logged in area of your application. If you see _app dot, you're looking at a logged in page. So this is the profile page after I log in. This is a page called signed in. This is just a root file, ignore it. _off is any of the pages related to login, logout. So reset password, sign in, sign up, forgot password. These are all going to be namespaced with _off dot and then the name of the page. And then finally, _public is for logged out users. This is the logged out website. And so that's how you think of your app. It's like, think of it in areas. Who is logged in where? There's a _something that will decide where the file is. And then that plays again nicely with Gadget's permissioning system. If you put a file in _app, it will never be seen by a user unless that user is logged in. They will be forced back to the home page or a login page. If you try to go to a page that requires login without being logged in, you're automatically going to be taken to the login page. So let's try it out. Like here, if I open this in a full tab and I try to go to /profile, which was one of the logged in pages, it redirects me to /sign-in. And why is that? Because /profile, if you look at it here, profile is in _app, which means I need to be logged in, and I am not logged in, so I must log in. And by default, we've set it so that every page, if you need to be logged in and you're not, we redirect you here. You can change that too with code, but the code we put is just kind of like the default most people use most of the time. So that's why you have a user table and a whole front end for users. There's a bunch of questions, so let's go to those. Started crackling return manageable, just speaking, still was, don't sweat it. Okay. How does that work in terms of Shopify apps? It's a little bit different. Let me open up a Shopify app in a moment. Actually, let me just do it now. So I guess you're asking about the namespacing inside Shopify apps, the way the front end files are named. Let's go pick an app. All we want to do is show you the nav here real quick, just to contrast it. So if you look at the nav of a Shopify app and you open up, let's close the API folder, let's look at web. Big differences in components. It's Polaris. Shopify does not want ShopCN, they want Shopify Polaris. So we put Shopify Polaris in here. The route structure, there is _app, which is the same as what you saw in the web app, and that's for logged in users. We don't give you in a Shopify app _public, because most Shopify apps don't have a logged out portion. They just have logged in. The logged out might be the Shopify store itself, like the actual like homepage of the store. And because we do not host your store, Shopify hosts your store, you don't ever put your store code here. Your store code lives inside Shopify. So if anything from Gadget is going to live on your Shopify store, you actually need to take the code into Shopify and add it to your store yourself. So that's why you don't see _public here, because _public is your store and your store is hosted by Shopify. But the rest is the same. _app is logged in. And the reason there's no _auth is because you're not doing email password login for Shopify. You're just kind of logging into Shopify through Shopify again, not through Gadget. So we don't have a whole auth UI to show you either. So it's the exact same breakdown to answer your question, Charles, just you won't see 2 out of the 3 usually. You'll only see _app. Coming back here, so I have my entire UI for login, log out, and I have an idea of where to put code. And again, just knowing that really helps me work with the AI quickly. So let's say I wanted to talk to the assistant and say, I don't really need this action, so I'm just going to ignore it. Let's say add a UI showing a table of my blog posts with the ability to create and update blog posts on different front-end routes. And by the way, this, I'll try to cover this in another call, but this is one of the things Gadget is really, really good at, is giving you tables and forms that just work and are connected to your backend. And the reason is we are your entire backend. We generated this documentation and we sent the docs to the AI. And so the AI is just much more likely to get it right in one go and not make a mistake. It has fewer lines of code to write. It has a lot more information about exactly how to write it. And so it just does a better job of getting it right in the first go. Whereas in a lot of other tools, you'll get really, really beautiful UIs, but they're not actually connected to a real data source. They're kind of faking the data. And then when you try to go and connect things to a data source, you end up in hell, because that is actually really, really hard to do with AI today. So I love building tables and forms with Gadget. One thing I found is, and I've only really stumbled on this convention building with Gadget, there's really 2 ways to lay out your standard kind of like table create update page. You either put them on separate pages, where one page is a table of all of the records, so you can search and maybe click on them. When you click on them, you're taken to a page of just that records data. And then there might also be a button that's like create, and that takes you to a third page where you can have an empty form to create one. So like basically a create page, an update page, and a table that shows you all the records. That's one layout. And the other layout is the table, the create and update all live on the same page, usually with modals. So like you have a table, but if you click on a row, it pops open a modal and you can edit the record. And if you click on a button to create a new record, it also pops open a modal and you fill in the form and you create a record. So those are kind of the two ways to do it, I think. It's either 3 separate pages linking to each other really nicely, or stick them all on one page with modals. And the AI always kind of takes a stab at one or the other. I like putting things on separate pages. There is a way to ask it, so it always does it that way. This time I didn't do it, so I'm kind of curious what it does. Let's go to our front end, see if it even gets it right. I hate this error. I can tell this is a fake error because if I wait long enough, I believe, oh wait, sorry, I'm going to the block. No, this is a real error. My bad. Let me first log in. Why am I not logged in? That's a bug. Sorry, I'm noticing so many bugs as we go through this, and it's quite annoying because this is supposed to let me create a user for myself, and it's not letting me do that. Okay, so this is the logged in page, the one that's signed in, and this is by default given to you. So we didn't design this page, if you're wondering where this UI came from. In the template, it's always there. There's a page called signed in, app signed in. This code is the UI for this page. Blog posts, if I click on it, I think I'll get an error, or maybe not even. Can't even go there. Let's go again. Oh, there we go. So this was the blog post page. I don't know why it errored in the gadget preview. That's weird. Something is wrong here. Okay, there's a bunch of bugs I need to go look into. But it didn't error here. So looks like most of it is working. So the create button isn't. The find by prop is required for actions that operate within a record identity. Let's hit fix and see what happens. I don't actually want to get distracted by this and end up building an app. I want to go back to explaining stuff. So if this doesn't work out, we're just going to ignore it and continue. See it talking about autoform. This is one of the concepts we have built into Gadget. For tables and forms, because we're your database and your API, we give you a way to kind of create an entire rich table with search, filter, pagination with one line of code or a few lines of code. And we usually tell our AI, if you're doing tables and forms, try to do it this way because it's going to be much more reliable. And if you can't do it this way, go down to lower level concepts. So in our front end, there's 3 ways to build using the API. You can build using GraphQL. When you go to your code snippets, there's always GraphQL. And you can also use React. So there's lots of React hooks that will let you fetch data from the backend. That's usually the way to build if there are no auto components. So if there are auto components, you'll use them. If no auto components, you'll use a lower level concept that has more lines of code. If you can't use that, you go even lower level with even more lines of code. And the reason you do it that way is because every line of code is both more opportunities for AI to mess up. So you want as few of them as possible. And then just generally, code is actually usually read, not written. And because it's read and not written most of the time, you want to keep it as short as possible because the people you work with will really appreciate it if you make one line, and not 10. And so usually we tell the AI use the fewest lines of code possible for the highest reliability, and that's auto components or auto form and auto table. And only if it can't use those does it start writing a lot of code. So I think it tried to fix things. Let's see if it actually did it. If not, we're just going to keep moving because I don't want to dwell on this too long. Oh, there you go. Great. So there's an edit page, but the edit page is currently crashing, and this makes sense because there's no record. Right now it's forcing me to go to the edit page for the first blog post, but there is no blog post for me to edit. So it's giving me an error saying, hey, there's no blog post with record one. And by the way, this is how the AI has decided the URL should work, and this is how I like it. Just like put a slash name of the area and then a slash record ID. So it'll be record 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the information related to that record. So this ID will be exactly the ID that is stored with every single row, which is kind of how I like it. And we've taught our AI to, unless you specify otherwise, this is the default way we'll do it, because we are all Ruby on Rails developers, and this is how Ruby on Rails teaches it, and it's a very good convention for business software. So that's kind of the front end, and it talks to the back end, and it actually should work. So let's just go and like create a blog post and see. Create a new post. Oh, server-side rendering error. Great. Let's go fix that. Sorry, we're working pretty hard on trying to get this assistant to as few errors as possible, but it'll be another month or two before it gets a lot better. I can see it made a mistake. The mistake it made is it decided that I was talking about the same issue I was talking about up here. Up here, I was dealing with it on my update page. Over here, I clicked on fix the error on my create page. The error happened to be exactly the same. And I think because of that, the AI got confused and it's now thinking it hasn't fixed the earlier issue, which it has fixed. It's just happening on a different page. And it's going and wasting its time updating my update page, which I don't want to do. I actually wanted to update my create page. So no, that error was occurring when I clicked create post. We're fixing the wrong file. And by the way, this is the extent to which, if I'm vibe coding, I'll read code. It's like the titles, the general placement of things, I'll scan it. Can't be bothered anymore to do anything by hand. So I'm pretty lazy and liberal about vibe coding. I just use my own knowledge of Gadget's framework to decide if it's relatively correct or not. And so this one seems right to me. And the reason this one's right is because I know anytime there's a blog.new is how the AI seems to create pages. So .new is the file for its create UI. And so now it's finally working on the right file. And by the way, if you see this files are outdated, it's because once we finish generating the file, if you give us 10 seconds, we'll have another cheap AI go through it all and double check it. And if it finds any easy mistakes it can fix, it'll invalidate the file, ask you to click this. This will update it, and now you can apply it. Oh my God. All right, I'm not going to do this because I'm in fix hell, and this might take a little bit of time. So that wasn't really the point of the framework explanation. But I think I've covered a good amount. I'm just trying to think, like, is this a good place to stop? Mostly because I got work to do, and I can do more of this later. So maybe I'll pause for now and answer some questions before I hop off. I explained the backend framework. I didn't go through Shelfwise connection and how that ties to the backend framework. I can do that next time. It's very similar. That'll be much quicker. Did you all find this useful? What would you have liked me to cover that I didn't cover? And should I do this again, and in what format? Maybe let's just take a couple of minutes while there's still some people here to get me some feedback. And then we'll call it. And I promise to do this more regularly. Like, this is very easy for me getting on a camera. And in fact, I think I would appreciate it if a few other people were on camera. It's a little awkward to be talking to a void for this long. But if there were just like two people breathing and asking me questions while I did this, it would be a lot easier. How does that work in terms of Shopify apps? I will have to do that later, Charles. I think that one's going to take another 15-20 minutes. So what I'll do is I'll probably book another one for tomorrow. I'll put it in Discord for anyone interested. And I'll just do another gadget framework explainer from the Shopify perspective. I think you all should join again because one, listening to it a second time will make it resonate a lot more. And then two, you'll see how Shopify just slots in perfectly into the exact same framework. It just introduces one new trigger type, but everything else is the same. What happens under code as of only being vibe coding more? The docs version. Yes, exactly. Yes. And that's why I think Charles and others, like a lot of other tools, are going to be very visual. I think humans are visual by nature. So everyone's like, let me just design it and then I'll go work on the back end. My suggestion would be start with your database tables. Just start there. Like every single project, just be like, okay, what data am I going to save in how many tables and how are they related to each other, and set them up. And frankly, like the difference between setting them up with AI and setting them up manually by clicking those buttons is like a few minutes. So that portion, AI is not really helping you that much. You can just like learn to click those buttons yourself, get the API you want, then go to the front end. You don't even have to customize the API. You don't have to add the code for like how the data is enriched and the email is fired off. Just get the boilerplate like CRUD, create, read, update, delete, that does nothing but just manipulate the database. Then go to your front end once the API is ready, because the API docs are going to be there and the docs are going to be fed to the AI and the accuracy will 10x. But if you go do it the other way around, you're going to build a front end that's not connected to a back end, just like Bolt and Lovable. Then you're going to try to go build the back end and connect it. And that's just inherently less reliable. So that would be my big advice to everyone is like, I know it's not intuitive for most people to think back end first, but just start with the database table if you can, and then move to the front end later. And maybe while I have you all, this is one thing that I'll talk about in a separate session, but the way to model an app in Gadget is to think of it in verbs and nouns. How to architect a Gadget app, a simple Gadget app. 1, ask yourself what concepts and entities you are working with. So if I'm building a blog, I'll be like, okay, I got this thing called blog, posts. I've got, readers or like users, let's say. I've got comments. Then go from entities to database tables. You will always have at least one table per entity. So sometimes you'll have more. Like blog, I'll actually break it in two and say like there's blog and blog images. And the reason is because it's not a one-to-one relationship, it's a one-to-many. And so I'll just split this into two tables. Users I'll keep as user, and comments I'll keep as comment. So now I have 4 tables, and these are nouns, by the way. And I mean this, like your database tables, your entities are always nouns. They're never verbs. They're spoken in English, they are nouns. Then you have actions, and these are verbs. What are the verbs that different users can take on these different tables? By default, you don't even have to think about it. There's always create, read, update, delete, because how else are you going to put data in a table if you don't have these 4? But what other verbs can you think of? So in my case, I'd be like, you know what? For the blog table, I'm going to have CRUD. I'm probably going to have publish. I'm probably going to have unpublish. And I'm going to separate these just because I like separating my logic. I can put all of the logic in update and write a lot of code that says, like, if they click up this one, do the update this way. If they click unpublish, do the update that way. It's better to break your logic apart, both for yourself and for the AI. So usually I would think in verbs and nouns. It's like, if the tables are my nouns, what are the verbs I can take on those nouns? And I would put the verbs underneath the noun they belong to. So for blog image, I would just do create, read, update, delete. And now I have that. And then for comments, same thing. Actually, there might be publish and unpublish too. It might not be the user clicking publish, but I might have a publish action that I'm going to do in the back end where I have the AI review the content the user creates. Or I can put that in the create action too, where before I actually save the data, actually, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to remove it. I'm going to say before saving the data, the comment, I'm going to run it through OpenAI to make sure no one's swearing or saying bad words. And then that way I can, you're no longer sharing your screen. Oops. That way I can prevent the creation of the data. Sorry, this is what I was doing. I was writing a document on how to architect a simple gadget app. I said, step one, I start by asking myself what concepts and entities I'm working with in the app. So in this simple blog, I have blog posts, users, and comments. These are always nouns. They're usually like nouns that the app is interacting with. Entities are not database tables. They're often at least one table each, but sometimes more than one. And in my case, I've decided the blog posts concept is actually two tables. There's blogs and blog images, and that's because there's a one-to-many relationship between them. So I'm going to create 4 database tables in Gadget. Then I go and I think about what are the actions? What are the verbs that I can take on each of these nouns? On blog, I can create, read, update, delete, and I can publish and unpublish. Blog image, create, read, update, delete, comment, create, read, update, delete. Then finally, step 4, I go back and I think about who can take each action, with the who being a distinct user role. So by default, Gadget gives me 2, and I can decide it's one of these 2, but I can also go and add more. And usually when I'm planning my app, I decide like I got 3 roles, 5 roles, whatever it might be. I go create them all. And once I'm done planning my app, I go and decide who, I start writing who to, and it could be multiple people. It doesn't have to be one role. I just kind of write next to each one of these, like, what is the party that is allowed to run this action? And that's kind of how I start every single one of my projects. This is how I break my logic down if I'm thinking about a backend. It's like, what are my entities? Let me go create some database tables. There's a missing step here where obviously you're going to pick the fields for each of these tables. What fields of data do you want? Then you're going to get your CRUD actions, but you don't stop there. You ask yourself, are there any other verbs, actions that I want on any of these tables? And you add the custom ones as well. Instantly, you get a full API for the backend, and you go build your front end. I'll do a few of those deep dives because I think that kind of architecting and modeling is super, super important. And Gadget makes it really easy to architect that way, the way I just explained it, because the Gadget framework wants you to tell it things in that way. And so if you can learn to architect your app in that way, and it's a very like newbie, intuitive, and friendly way, you will get really, really, really far with Gadget, and you will get really far with AI in terms of accuracy as well. So in a few of the subsequent conversations, I'll actually do like problem breakdown, data modeling. Why am I putting these things in separate actions instead of in the same one? Because there's usually good engineering decisions behind each of these that are super simple to understand, even for non-engineers. The first time you hear it, you'll be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense why he put it in 2 separate files instead of the same one. And if you all can learn that, including the citizen developers, you will build very, very serious things with Gadget. because the framework will guarantee performance and scale if you kind of meet that mental model. Okay, I am going to publish this everywhere. Hopefully it ends up okay. Unfortunately, it's like 2 or 3 separate videos, so on YouTube it might be a little choppy. You'll find it in our YouTube live streams. And I'm going to schedule another one for tomorrow where I'll do the Shopify connection portion. And on Discord in the new developers channel, if there's other things you guys want me to cover in these sessions, just drop a comment. I'll put a channel, a thread together for like, what do you want me to cover in my live streams? And just drop comments of what you want me to teach. Because I'll do these daily or every 2 days, and I'm going to do them very informally where I'll just announce them on Discord and a few other channels and then jump on a call. Just because I don't really have time to prepare and I'm going to run back to another meeting. I have a board meeting in 15 minutes that I'm not prepared for. And so it's this, then go prepare for a board meeting and board meeting. And like, that's my life right now. So this is the level of quality and fidelity I can do. So drop what you'd like in the Discord and I'll do another one tomorrow. Hopefully this was super useful to you all. Thank you for your time and excited to see what you all built. Take care.